That's how the most brilliant businesses in the world have been built.
There are many hidden gems in Eastern Europe.
Being crazy enough to push against all obstacles.
I remember the first time I saw him pitch, and it was like, you drew like, wow.
I don't see a future without network-driven sourcing.
I give you something, you give me something.
I love that question because in the end, I think
there's a huge amount of deals, right?
Early stage is a long-term game.
Examples of success in such a competitive market.
I try to search for talent magnets.
Red flag, I'm not going more.
Getting very deep. Back to the business.
Nico Schoenenberger.
Yes, fantastic.
How's it going?
Very good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing fine. I think this interview will be published January the 21st, probably, but we're close to Christmas now.
Yeah.
Super stressing time of the year. No? How is it going for you?
It is wrapping up things most predominantly, frankly speaking. So a lot of stuff happening within the fund, within the team, some investments to close, some founders unfortunately to pass on, but with a very honest answer by the end of the year. So yeah, all of us wrapping up the year and very much looking forward to at least like a couple of days or maybe 1 to 2 weeks to recharge batteries a bit for the new year.
Yeah. You already mentioned the fund. You're part of 10X. You're the first employee of 10X.
Exactly.
So please tell us what is 10X and what do you guys do?
Sure. My pleasure to be here. So briefly about my story. So originally, my father's French, my mother's German. So I was born in France. And that's where my last name comes from, Shonenberger. You can pronounce it a French way, then it's Schönenberger. But I grew up in Germany, basically, near the Lake of Constance, close to Ulm, then went to Munich to study, to TUM, did computer science and finance. Really enjoyed that, but also realized I'm not a coder. I'm not an investment banker, maybe somewhere in between. And so tried private equity, corporates, consulting, all of that interesting. Not for the long term, not for me. And so in 2017, I ended up building a business in Nairobi in Kenya. That was a hell of a ride. We were rookie founders.
Why so in Kenya?
Well, I was part of a student-run consultancy in Munich called Academy Consult.
Okay.
Really enjoyed the time there. Super interdisciplinary teams. And like a couple of years before I joined, there was a team from Academy Consult going to South Africa, to Johannesburg, to build a student consultancy and bring that concept basically to elsewhere. And then a couple of years later, we stumbled across that idea and said, man, why not building or doing the same, basically, but in a different hub? And Nairobi, or Kenya in general, is like the capital, more or less, of Eastern Africa. A lot of universities, brilliant students, good companies. And that's basically the ingredients that you need if you want to bring students and companies together in consulting projects. And
that's
so we picked
nice.
Nairobi. Well, it was 2017. I was 22 years old, super naive. I was the first time ever in Africa in my life.
Wow.
I had absolutely no clue.
Wow.
But we took the leap, 5 Germans flying down there, building a business. And we recruited 25 people, onboarded them, trained them, basically based on the role model of Academy Consult. So we took a lot of their processes that we learned and really started to appreciate, to do that with African students. And in the end, we had to fire some of them. We had to close shop eventually when COVID hit. But I returned back to Germany. For me, it was super clear that I'm going to stay somehow in the startup ecosystem and do not end up in consulting or elsewhere. And then became, one of the first employees of Fernride here in Munich, also one of the TUM startups. Was very lucky to meet one of the founders in a seminar at university. And back then it was a unique opportunity for me to join, one of the first employees, build a go-to-market motion. And then over the course of the first year, I think I realized, yes, I'm entrepreneurial, but I love early stage. And instead of following on with Fernride, I said, then maybe I'll switch sides of the table and do early stage at scale. And that's basically my story, how I ended up with 10X. And when I joined 4 years ago, back then, there was basically nothing. So I signed my contract. There was not even a name for the vehicle we were supposed to raise.
Okay.
So that's basically how early I joined. And hell of a ride, 160 million vehicle, backed from only entrepreneurs and business angels so far. And basically piggybacking on the background of my partners, all of them previously entrepreneurs, built their own businesses, got into angel investing with some good names. And then 2021, when we decided basically to launch the fund, or 2020, when we thought about, we said, okay, it just felt like a very natural transition to scale angel investment activities with like a bit of external capital, but continue investing as early as it can get. That's what we do now in pre-seed and seed, pan-European, generalist focus, but a bit of like the new kid on the block and very collaborative. So love to be around with like other people, join podcasts, collaborate with other VCs, with angels, with founders, and every day feeling very privileged that this is a job that I'm doing.
Before jumping and digging deeper in 10x, I wanted to understand this earlier phase of your life when you did all these entrepreneurship activities. And I honestly want to understand what was the relevance of being in TUM rather than in any other university in Germany. And if you could give, because I realize reading the stats that most of the people is not from Germany who listen to this, but if you could explain what is TUM, why it's so relevant, especially in Munich, and if you think, 2 questions in one, and if you think that you would have had the same path in a different environment / university.
I start with the second question first, so absolutely no chance.
Wow.
So I think in the end, if you look back at like the very early career choices that you made in your life or that I made in my life, like it feels super structured and super straight to the point, like in hindsight. But when I was there, I had absolutely no clue. So I always wanted to become a consultant. I think that's what I learned, not at university, but maybe more during my time at Academy Consult, the student consultancy, because I enjoyed 2 things. The first one was working with smart people. And the second one, to have a huge variety of tasks in my daily business. Because I get bored very easily. And so I said, maybe then consulting is the right choice for me. And very luckily then, and I think that's the big contribution of TUM, that after my bachelor's in management technology, I was able to deep dive in my master's and had a maximum level of flexibility to choose what kind of courses I wanted to take.
That's great.
And then I went a lot into entrepreneurship. I did some courses in entrepreneurial finance, so like how to finance startups essentially, business plan seminars. I did another like what we call a project study where we work for 2 months for a startup, more or less for free, which I also took the leap. And eventually I think all of those like very entrepreneurial measures, nitty gritty, in the end like formed a very big picture of me, that I said, to some extent, maybe I belong to the startup ecosystem somehow, because all the other things that I tried out in my life didn't really stick around. Sorry. And I think that's the big contribution that TUM essentially delivered with like all of those seminars, very practically relevant with like startups coming by, founders, investors, a lot of guest lectures also within seminars that I really much enjoyed. That I think that was puffing my way a bit to that position that I'm in right now.
Yeah, it's devil is in details, right? So it's when you describe it like we have these special crash courses, seminars, etc. I think it's not only about the structure, but actually the content that you get. Because I've been hearing people with, I've done especially founders, different companies. I've seen them myself that they say, we've done this business plan, we've done this strategy, and then you look at it and it's like, this makes no sense. Like it's so unrealistic, not because of the numbers itself, but the whole structure, it just makes no sense. So I guess that what I imagine is that what they do at TUM so well is to actually filter the content so the information that you have there is relevant.
I mean, like that's the one piece, and the second piece is particular for those entrepreneurship courses, more or less, they try to make it as practically relevant as possible. So I can give you an example. I did a seminar in my master's called VC Lab. It was a new kind of format that was launched by a professor from Stanford in collaboration with the professors at TUM.
Cool.
What they essentially did, they took business plan students on the one side, basically people that were just about to draft and design their first business idea, and they paired them up with people that pretended to be VCs. I was a VC back then, and that's how I got into the industry, basically. So I was trained to basically how to look into business models, like what kind of questions to ask, how to model a cap table, like a bit of those like technical skills. And then part of the course was basically to let us
That's so cool.
Let us discuss, let us evaluate, let us ask questions with like the business plan seminar students and the VCs on the other side. And eventually it resulted in us as the VCs writing an investment memo that basically went very deep in terms of evaluation of the business. And we shared that with the founders so that eventually they could also like reflect on their own thoughts, on like what other people thought, to get some feedback. And that's one of those like very practical examples how TUM basically tries to bring real life experience.
That's it.
At least, even if it was simulated in that case, but like very well educated from the professors back into theory, into content, and so that people are actually forced to try it out, to build prototypes. There's other courses on that. And then obviously the Munich-based ecosystem, particularly TUM, is very well connected with all kind of like angels, other founders that attended TUM, but also VCs. And then TUM has become a little bit of like a household name within the German VC or even European VC ecosystem. That like people are super keen to back people that are coming out of that very entrepreneurial university.
It's worth framing that you were doing the masters in science. You said science and technology, or did
management technology?
Management technology.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I was combining computer science and finance essentially.
Okay.
In one study program.
Okay, that's why the branch of finance is the one that gave you access to the entrepreneurship, or everyone had that?
To entrepreneurial finance, yes, but within my master's, like 30 credits, so we had to take 120. 30 was reserved for the master thesis, 30 was reserved for computer science, 30 for finance, and 30 was to be picked totally free.
Wow.
And that was basically the finance piece. I took entrepreneurial finance, so startup financing. For the free credits, I went a lot into entrepreneurship, and then I paired basically both and wrote my thesis about venture capital related topics. In the end, like 90 out of 120 credits that I took over the last 2 years at the university were basically related to startup or startup financing.
Because they allow you.
Because they allow you. That's a very beautiful thing. And at that point, I maybe also have to thank the student council.
Yeah.
That like 1 year before I joined my master's, basically we redesigned the whole master's program so that we had that level of flexibility that then shapes basically the profiles of the people participating and completing the program in a way as it was for mine.
That's so nice. It's such a shock for me from like coming from the Spanish university system that is more like super theoretical. I did economics. So it was like more about maths, game theory, microeconomics.
That was my bachelor's.
Okay.
But still, and that was the master's before it was redesigned. So in the end, I think there's a lot of that has improved over the last 5 years.
Yeah, I guess.
That's for sure.
And I did my studies a bit before 5 years ago. But
how old are you? Do you want to touch upon that topic?
No, the interview is about you. Let's just change topic.
All easy. But look at my hair and then decide who's younger.
But the hair is just a matter of money. It's not a matter.
Is it?
You are like that because you want to. Because you could go click, 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 and you're done.
Kentucky.
Yeah. No need. Not even need. You could go anywhere else. Like I did it in Spain.
You did it in Spain. Okay.
I did it in Spain. Easy, clean.
Okay.
Like
it's getting very deep. No, sorry. Back to the business.
If you ask, I'll answer. Instead of
No worries.
Yeah. So we were mentioning that this whole path led you to 10x.
Absolutely.
And the 10x is a 160 million vehicle that devotes the money and the time to invest in early startups.
Yes.
So, what do you think? You already mentioned that it's backed by entrepreneurs, etc. So, what do you think it makes 10x unique, if any, or why? What is the USP that you ask entrepreneurs? What would be in 10x?
Yeah, I mean, like exactly this entrepreneurial aspect of our business is the most important piece, because all of the partners of the fund basically have built their own businesses.
Yeah,
we run the firm in a very entrepreneurial fashion, and given that we have been entrepreneurs, then angels, and now turning VC investors, we have realized what it really needs to build businesses. And frankly speaking, most of the time, the biggest value you can create as a VC to founders is just give them money and not stand in their way.
yeah,
And I think that's particularly what you understand when you have built your own businesses and maybe had some VCs on board that were just like blocking you from doing your business and executing because they asked stupid questions and wanted to have a special level of reportings and were just trying to intervene in the business and thought they can run it better themselves. Most often they cannot. And I think that's what we have learned as entrepreneurs, and we try to be those kind of investors.
Do you also lead rounds?
And we lead rounds. I mean, like we can. It's like a bit of a split strategy, lead rounds, co-lead or follow.
Okay.
Tend more towards the follower piece, frankly speaking, just because we love to co-invest. We always want to basically build the best available cap table, bring all the relevant people onto one, like into the right positions to position the company in the best way. But what we then try to do, I mean, like even if we keep our feet still, in the end, we're always super receptive when it comes to active approaches from the founders. So whenever the founders come to us, we would always react like, do you have an introduction to this and that company? Can you help us with like some feedback on my deck because I want to go out and fundraise? That's always something that we're very receptive on. But we're not the right investor basically to help you to recruit your CTO or like to recruit your head of sales or to discuss in very much detail how to run your go-to-market motion, because we want to invest in people that know, or at least if they're not knowing, then maybe they're very good in figuring out how to do and to run their business. And then we're just enjoying the ride and helping whenever we can without standing in the entrepreneur's way.
Yeah.
And that's basically, if I would need to summarize the strategy of 10x, it's like that community-powered vehicle to connect the right people at the right point in time, while us ourselves having a very low ego and always staying in the background.
How difficult it is, this line, especially if you're a lead investor, this line between I don't want to stay in the founders way because they know, otherwise I don't invest in them, and tell them, hey, I have this best practice from these other 30 companies that I just invested. Maybe you should change your reporting. Maybe you should change your sales structure. Yeah. How do you cope with this too?
I love that question because in the end, I think the philosophy of 10X is that we don't share advice, we share experiences.
Okay.
So we would never tell the founders, oh, if I was in your shoes, that's, by the way, the worst sentence how an advice can start. Like, if I was in your shoes, because you're not. But we would never use it also in a business sense. It's about, okay, guys, listen, yes, you have certain ideas on like how to run your go-to-market motion, for example. Mm-hmm. Let me just tell you what I have experienced with 5 other portfolio companies, how they structure their go-to-market. And all of that is provided as input, as a as additional data basically to the founders, and then it's up on them to make up their mind. But the most successful founders are the ones typically that haven't listened too much in the past. Yeah. So we look for founders that are coachable, but you need, as a founder, I think you need to be crazy enough to push against all boundaries, to listen to take feedback into account, and then build your own conviction and execute based on that. And I think that's how the most brilliant businesses in the world have been built. If people told Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or like Nick Storonsky from Revolut or so on in the very early days what they really thought about a business, does the world really need another bank, another computer, well designed? Like out of 100 people, most likely 90 of them told them to stop working on that idea. Yeah. But that's why it's so important for us to not stand in the way, that the people execute, share experiences, not advice. And we even have whenever we lead rounds, we sometimes run a bit of a different model. So we can take board seats, then we take a bit more of an active role where we say, okay, yes, we're your first phone call. But we would never, at least how I experienced it over the last 4 years with 10X, it's that we never intervene with the business that the founders want to run.
Yeah, that's good. And actually, I think it makes sense what you were saying about taking leaving the ego aside, because you're like, I'm sharing, it's all about how you communicate it, right? Yeah. So it's like, I found this and this and that, but you could also say, based on my experience, let me tell you that.
No. We're sure, as I said, and as you summarized very, very correctly, that we share those things, but in the end, it's up on the founder to decide how to incorporate it in the business, and maybe they don't. And that's also a quality of founders, to listen to a lot of stuff, build your own opinion, own conviction, and then execute on what you believe is right for your own business. And I think some investors also overestimate their role in building companies, because in the end, the founders know the market better, they know the idea better, they know the customers better, they know their product better, they know basically everything better. So why should we as investors then intervene and think about like, okay, we know how to run it better, because we don't.
Yeah, true. Yeah, that's also hard when you listen to someone else saying, you at the end of the day, as you are a money manager. That's it. You put the money and you let it work.
Yes.
Yes, but you do some more stuff on top.
Yeah.
But changing a little bit the topic is, being in the early stage, there's a huge amount of deals, right? Series B, you may know all of them in your fields. Yeah. Series early stage, it doesn't happen. So first, how do you source the best deals? And actually, I see that you're pretty bold, because you have even your email on LinkedIn there. Like, shoot me that, like, man. Okay, that's good. But like, how do you source first? And then we will go to the selection phase.
I think it's like 4 different channels or so, more or less, that we use as a firm. The first one is, given that we are community powered, we heavily rely basically on our entrepreneurial LPs, sharing companies with us. We also run a fellows network. It's more like a scout network, more or less, that other funds also have.
Nice.
With people across Europe. That's like a bit of like a network-driven sourcing. The second component is we run an outbound tool, as many other funds do, that we scrape, for example, on LinkedIn, Product Hunt, sometimes on Twitter, like just to get to know people that are suddenly building in stealth and changing their profile title. And then there's a third component, given that we have that very collaborative position in the network, that we can, whenever other funds lead rounds, we can follow. Whenever other funds follow in a round and committed, we can lead. So we're very good friends with a lot of the European, particularly, but also US funds, and just exchange with them very regularly about deal flow that we see. And then the last component, I think that's the most promising one, and it's maybe also my top number one. If I was to give advice, then maybe advice to founders out there, find other portfolio companies of the fund to introduce you to. And because in the end, like if one of my portfolio companies comes to me and tells me, Nico, listen, there's like that one tool that we use these days in like sales, HR, whatever, finance, I would always be curious because you get that social stamp. And that's now something that's actually coming to existence and even sometimes compounding that like either founders that I invested in, but also founders that I didn't invest in, send me their friends. And say, okay, somehow I like that conversation. I know you're kind of like maybe a kind guy. You were helpful. You were respectful with the questions that you asked. So in the end, just would you maybe want to speak to my friend? And maybe they're as lucky as we are or a little bit luckier on like receiving an investment.
This triggers in my head questions about the future of VC in terms of, we'll talk about the future later, but in terms of, or regarding this very aspect of scouting, it's like everything is going to be data driven. Probably there's some theories that says all the deal flow will be shared, right, by everyone. So we will have access to the same deals. I already think it's quite difficult, but okay, let's assume. But what you were mentioning, and this is obviously common, is that basically your network, the people that you trust, will give you probably the best deals. How do you think that this kind of dichotomy would be between I trust my private network that is by default exclusive, or I have this pipe of open data that I can search and find my right fit?
I think it depends a bit on which stage you invest in. So if you go for pre-seed companies, which we are chasing, that can sometimes be like just 3 people sitting down for lunch and deciding we want to build a company. They put together a deck. They will never change their LinkedIn title. They will not appear in like any kind of like data set. So this will only be known if we have the right network because they know someone whom they ask for feedback and then they share it with us. So at the very early stage, I think there's no way around network-driven sourcing. If you go a little bit later stage for like seed rounds, so if a company already raised a pre-seed, they may be appearing on Crunchbase, another database, they change their title on LinkedIn, they recruit the first people. So there's some chatter that starts to form around that company, so you can maybe spot it. And latest at the Series A, Series B stage, I think there's absolutely no way around data-driven sourcing. Because at that point, you have a lot of data available, you have website traffic, you have hiring plans, you have development of employees on also tracked on LinkedIn, you have funding history. And by that time, I think there is enough of a digital footprint that your data-driven tooling basically can spot those companies and maybe even cluster and then report it back to you as a VC. But for pre-seed, seed, I don't see a future without network-driven sourcing.
Makes sense.
And that's our philosophy also within 10x, that we share and get shared and eventually know about, hopefully, the most promising founders as early as we can.
And even at some point, building on top of what you said, there's some data that's going to be very difficult to like act on, because imagine company X is doing stealth and then they did a pre-seed and something like that and not really interested in the market. And 2 years later, because they develop a technology, they do another thing, but the revenues are not really ramping up. But the story behind, because normally the numbers, yes, there's some cases, right, that will tell the story, but normally the numbers at those stages, they don't share the story. So you still need to get some intel extra.
I would still guess if like there's a founder underway of like building a business for like 2 years, he or she would change his or her LinkedIn profile.
That is true.
That's, for example, something that you can spot. Like even if there's no revenue in like the German Handelsregister, Register of Commerce or whatever, you will at least find the founder profile somehow. But for the pre-seed companies I sometimes speak to, like, sorry to say, but sometimes those founders are still employed with their old employer.
Of course.
And they have built some, or have an idea in parallel and just want to validate with a few VCs. Some people just quit their job but haven't updated their LinkedIn profile. So it's a bit more secretive. So you need to have your eyes and ears everywhere in Munich, in Germany, in Europe, to just get to know the best people basically that are about to start, or even start thinking about building a new business.
You just mentioned right now about having your ears and eyes in Munich, in Europe, in the rest. So I can imagine that you can track, and I know you travel a lot, but you can track Munich at some point. You can more or less know what's going on. Being a pan-European fund, how do you cope with all the opportunities in Europe and how do you prioritize?
Welcome to my daily struggle. So I still try to find an answer myself, how essentially that's run in the best and most efficient way, because opportunities in early stage are unlimited. So you always need to prioritize. And depending on like what kind of region we speak about, like we run different approaches. So within Germany, Munich and Berlin, we're pretty confident that we will hopefully or most likely hear about the most promising things as early as we can. In Munich, all of us are sitting here, so we spend a lot of time at relevant events, at relevant organizations with the CDTM, Manager More, Academy Consult. So we get a feeling of like what's going on. Berlin is a bit further away, but still we're there quite frequently. We have good friends there. And for most of the other countries, like either we go there on a regular basis, but particularly we rely on the local ecosystem to help us source, and it helps to be very collaborative in a network.
I give you something, you give me something.
Exactly. Even though we're not, I personally at least, most of us within 10x, maybe even all of us, we're not transactional, so it's not that we share 5 deals, we want to have 5 deals back, of course. But we try to build relationships with those kind of people. And with the Scout Network, for example, or Fellows Network, that's the one piece that we run, like 50 people around Europe, people very well connected, on the ground, flagging us relevant opportunities that they see, but particularly also other VCs whenever they do the local sourcing. That's, for example, something how we cover the Central Eastern European region in Eastern Europe, where there's so many different countries. You can't even cover all of them from Germany alone. Yeah. So you need to basically be in touch with the right people locally, be a good friend with them, be supportive, be collaborative. Yeah. And if you're perceived as such, then people are also more than willing to share opportunities. And then you get wind of those like 2 to 3 rounds per country in Eastern Europe that you should maybe spend time with. So it's that philosophy basically of like being, even if we're not around, still being a bit of top of mind. And that's the constant struggle of like, do I invest my time in like meeting other VCs? Do I spend my time on meeting other founders and evaluating on the portfolio? Like, welcome to the life of VC in the end. I think as a founder it's not different, but you constantly need to reprioritize how your day would look like and what's adding the most value to the eventual success of the firm.
Because you also have the task of the portfolio management. You have the split by everyone, right? There's not one portfolio manager. No. Or one that you just follow the thing of the companies.
The one investing in a company is the one also taking care eventually.
That makes sense. That's what I always think that makes sense. You mentioned the CEE region that I think is super interesting. And I just want to briefly point out that we did some investments there, and I personally think that at least the trade-off that you get from really good technical talent at not so high valuations that try to jump into a market like Germany, I found that there are many hidden gems in Eastern Europe in general. Yeah. And I don't know, I feel that it could be something that could be still.
We did a couple of investments in that space already in that region, like 2 or 3 of them in Warsaw. I'm now moving more to the east, now looking at a company in Slovenia. Spent a lot of time with founders out of Bulgaria in the last weeks, and as you said, it's hidden gems, and I would even stress the hidden, because in the end, if you're not on the ground, I think most likely from Europe at least would feel like you need to speak to a lot of different founders and to identify like that one raw diamond more or less that you can shape, and that can become really big. But that's the way how UiPath came into existence. That's the way also how Payhawk eventually worked.
UiPath, the biggest return in VC history in Europe, I think. Yeah,
that's incredible. But because it was somehow affordable, it was off the beaten track, nobody was aware of them other than Dan from Early Bird who said, let's take a leap. And I think I'm still very keen to find the next UiPath out of Romania, Bulgaria, you name it.
I don't want to say anything, but we co-invest with Dan actually in Pointy, which is an RPI tool. So I just want to say kudos and shout out.
I hope for the best.
They're so good. They're so good. But it's funny just how these stories suddenly, boom, the biggest return, and it's like it was there. Now the second part is you have this huge amount. How many companies do you talk to per year, roughly? I don't know if you track them even.
I need to run the numbers, but we invest in approximately 20 a year. The portfolio of the fund is like it's 75 companies, I think. And if you apply a typical selection rate of like 1%, maximum 2% of the companies that we speak to, then in the end with 20 investments, we end like at 2,000 or so companies that we need to evaluate on a daily basis. On a yearly basis, apologies. And we are a team of 4 to 5, so I think between 400, 500 teams I'm in touch with. Not with all of them I speak, and not with all of them I go very deep. Of course. But in the end, I think that's the founder touch points I have.
What are the keys that excites you when you see a company, or what are the things that you say, red flag, I'm not going more?
I like to talk more about the positive things in the end. Okay. And I know that it depends a bit on like the personal preferences of the fund, but also of the investor. And like for me, whenever I invest pre-seed particularly, there's nothing else than the team.
Yeah.
Maybe they have an idea. Yes, I evaluate the market. I evaluate like kind of like, do they have pilot customers, the MVP, like, but all of that feels a bit of like a hygiene factor because in the end, the idea can change, the product can change, the market can change. So I want to back the right people. And within the over the last 4 years, I've developed a bit of a framework on like 3 main character traits that I look for within founders.
Nice.
The first one is energy level. So like the way they transport basically their vision. Do I believe that with that energy and with that vision, with that passion, they can bring investors on board, customers on board, talent on board in hiring? So how do they speak about it? And that's why I sometimes also advise founders, like whenever they're supposed to speak to investors, do not schedule that like 7 p.m. CET call because you will be fully drained after a full day of meetings. But try to structure it, doing it in the early mornings when you're most productive, maybe in the afternoons, to really spread that energy about what you do. The second piece is I want to see grit. So I want to see basically that people, well, at least in the best case, I want to see it, but I'm always very keen to back founders basically that have gone through the very bad in life to some extent. So like that have shown perseverance, that have overcome obstacles, that have sometimes taken the leap and tried something unconventional, that broke out of their own comfort zone, like just did something, maybe failed, learned from that, but still did it again. And like that kind of mentality, I think, something that you need as founder because you go through an emotional roller coaster of like ups and downs on a daily basis, maybe on an hourly basis, on a weekly basis, and in the end, like always being crazy enough to push against all obstacles, and no matter how often you fall, you always stand up again. I think it's one of the very important traits for a founder. And the third one is, and maybe a combination of the first two, is like I try to search for talent magnets. And talent magnets essentially means that, in the end, as a founder, you won't build that business alone. So it's very, very important how and with whom you surround yourself with. And this can be your co-founders, like what kind of people were you able to acquire on that joint mission? What were your early hires? Maybe a board of advisors, even though I discount that always a bit. The early investors, if we invest seed, like who was supporting in the pre-seed, the kind of level of angels. It demonstrates your network. It demonstrates basically what you are, the kind of person that other people want to work with you. And that's incredibly important if you want to build a business that's like a 2,000, 5,000, whatever kind of like company in the end. And with those 3, it's hard to judge outside in, I know, but particularly whenever I'm in a call with founders, I think that's the kind of framework that I try at least mentally to apply.
Yeah, I like it because it shows super obviously how, the talent magnets, you can somehow measure it. Yeah. The grit and the energy level is a bit subjective, so you need to experience it. But I think that obviously when people always say invest in the team, I had some founders that says, what do they mean by invest in the team? Like, it depends. But normally, for example, I also, just to give an extra thing, like that the founder, if possible, they will find the problem themselves in a previous life doing something, and then it's like they try to fix it with all the knowledge that they already have for being in the customer side or the provider side, but they know the problem that they saw.
Yeah, we call it solving your own problem. That's typically also driving the energy that you have and the passion, because if you really, excuse my French, but really pissed off of that one problem that you experience in your life and then want to solve it, that's a perfect motivation. Yeah. Because that will keep you pushing even though maybe the whole world is against you.
I thought you were going to say something harder than piss. Excuse my French, then you said piss. Hombre.
Not on a podcast.
Okay.
No, I mean, like I get that point, but on the other side, it's sometimes hard and difficult to explain to founders what we mean by those kind of characteristics, because it's nothing that you can maybe
But
learn.
you will see it. You will see it. When you see it.
Yeah. But as a founder, like, how can you improve? If I pass on a founder, say, okay, energy level is a bit lacking, like, I would never be that transparent, frankly. I mean, like, that's just not my role to judge on people and their character traits.
That's fair.
And I know it's just my personal preference and other investors will like better. So, like, how can you train that? You can go to surround yourself with the right people, maybe like learn a bit to be more outgoing, passionate about the idea, iterate.
Even learn tricks about facial expressions or your hands, how to use them to communicate better. But I remember that I'm too chatty today anyway, I don't know why. But I remember that one of the companies that we invested in, Wayra, actually this was in Wayra in Spain, Eindhoven, they're doing great. The founder, Manuel, I remember the first time I saw him pitch, and he was like, you drew like, wow, like this guy. And not because actually because of the humbleness and how he was so focused on his core project. He was a cardiologist, and now he built this company that developed Willem, that basically helps you to analyze the heartbeat patterns and will help cardiologists to go way faster. So like, let's try to provide a elite sports treatment to your heart, even if you're not in the sport elite. So let's try to bring you the most of the knowledge that we have. And the point is, going to what you said about the energy level, grit and talent magnets, the team that he was surrounded with super early, how he explained, which is not, I'm sharing this just to make the point that it's not about, hey guys, you want to be the first SaaS in Germany? But no, it's just about everything must make sense. Your energy doesn't need to be super extrovert, because he's just, I'm explaining this, I do this, I did that, we did that, then we realize.
But he brings the right answers, most likely.
He brings the right answer and the right energy, because you trust him.
And I think what you also see that for this kind of like character traits, you don't need to have McKinsey in your CV. You don't have to be been at like an investment bank or a venture or in private equity. But I think it's something that each and everyone as a founder can possess. And yes, maybe sometimes it helps to get to good schools in the end, to build the relevant network, to maybe have been in like McKinsey to learn how to build slides and build a pitch deck, or like a fancy financial model because you're trained on that for like the first 2 years. And all of that can help. But in the end, I think founder profiles are so different and founder backgrounds are so different that like no matter what kind of school you went to, no matter what kind of employer you had, no matter how older you are and what kind of experiences you had, you can always be a great founder and find the right idea, execute on it, and build a big business. And I think that's typically my key message also to founders if they approach me. It's like, okay, Nico, what are you looking for? So like, I don't require you to go to WHU, TOM, or McKinsey. Just like find an idea that you're really passionate about, execute on it, iterate, build a team around you, and then give it a try. And if it does not work, then please don't stop, but go for the second idea. If you really want to leave an impact in the world, then it will need a couple of more tries.
Probably.
And if you stop after the first time, I think that plays back to the grit piece in the end, and maybe also building a business is not for you. And that's totally fair. It wouldn't be for me either.
That's okay. Do you know the age of the founders, the average age of the founders, now that you mentioned that? More or less roughly?
In our portfolio, I think we go from 2, so like founders that basically dropped out of university at age 18, 19.
Okay.
We backed them at pre-seed.
Even 18, 19?
18, 19. Super, like brilliant guys, super clever, super intelligent. Maybe it was 20, but like
still
very, very young, up to founders that build like their third business at age 30, 45, 50, and north of that. I think the average unicorn founder, there was a statistic, I would need to look up the number, but it's like 40 plus. When they start their business. So you don't need to be Mark Zuckerberg dropping out of college to build a big business. But typically life experience, work experience.
This is one of the typical myths that you hear in startups. It's like, no, actually the age again of our portfolio probably is over 30.
Over 30?
Probably, I maybe I'm picking it up, but
I can understand that like the 20-year-old wonder kid founder that builds Meta is ending up on the Forbes magazine, right? Like the 45-year-old average unicorn founder, it's still a brilliant story, but it's not something that the public is too receptive about. And I think that's good already point. Providing some data points that's more towards the average, and that like the 25-year-old unicorn founder is the absolute exception.
And to understand the dynamics of 10x related to the fund, so are shorter the circles in early, in the sense of we have 160, we will invest within 5 years, so you're getting to the end of the fund, I can assume, more or less. If that's the case, you divest, or do you try to you divest during 5 more years, you do some follow-ons, blah, blah. But do you see that these circles are getting shorter, so meaning I'm already looking for exits in year 5, year 6, year 7?
I mean, like for exits, we're not really looking for, because in the end, I think you can't time the market. And as an early stage fund, it's your responsibility to pick the right companies, support them, and then just be patient and wait. And if you look at like the angel portfolio also of my partners, like the kind of companies they invested in, and if they had done an analysis like 15 years ago, whom do we believe is becoming the, let's say, like best misses in our portfolio, they would have been totally wrong. Because there were some companies that had good traction early on that went bust afterwards, and there were a couple of companies that didn't grow at all that are now the ones basically returning the portfolio. So early stage is a long-term game, and I think that's what we also acknowledge within 10x. We tried for Fund 1 now. We started in 2021, approximately mid of the year, to deploy capital. Now we're like towards mid-end of the year 2024. 3.5 years of investment period. We backed 75 founding teams. So I think that's totally in line. That's also what we see.
Yeah.
We didn't want to be faster nor slower. In the end, like we're just super happy and satisfied with like what we built. At a certain point in time, we will need to launch a second fund. I think that's just a business model of a venture firm that like you invest initially with the first fund, then you have some reserves. And I think that's part of the strategy within 10x, that we have enough capital to follow on with the companies we already invested in, whilst investing initially into new companies with a new fund. And yes, if people just do the math, I think at a certain point in time, the second fund will become a priority within 10x too.
Nice. Let's switch a little bit to the topic of, which is a broader topic, about Munich. Because I wanted to talk to you.
How long have you been in Munich
1 year and a half, I think.
1.5?
More or less, yes. I love it. I love the city.
You love it?
Not right now, actually, maybe during these weeks, but it's been super dark. But it's
wait for summer or another summer. I'm such a big fan.
Summer is just massive.
Yeah.
But I wanted to understand a little bit, and I want you to explain to the audience. How do you see Munich as an ecosystem? Especially, I ask you because you are quite well connected in the rest of Europe. Yeah. So how do you see Munich in terms of ecosystem related to other parts of Europe?
I mean, if I needed to keep it short, I would have said it's like a beautiful place. So I'm here for 10 years now. I did my bachelor's, my master's. I then joined 10x within Munich. So I always went elsewhere, occasionally Nairobi, France, and so on. But I always loved coming back to Munich. And I'm super happy to have found my home also in a professional way here in Munich, because like I think the opportunities that the city provides, it's almost unmatched elsewhere in Europe. So Paris is flourishing, yes, in terms of AI, but like what we have in Munich is like super strong enterprises, Siemens, BMW, Infineon, you name it, like many very large conglomerates. And on the other side, you have strong universities, LMU, you have the TUM, and both of them joined forces to build an organization called CDTM, the Center for Digital Technology Management, that is basically helping people or training people to become entrepreneurs. We now have the first role models of like Hanno from Personio, Bastian Nominacher and his co-founders from Celonis. We have the guys from Scalable Capital, and like so many others that basically have proven that you can build big businesses.
Not bad examples.
And what I eventually realized is that for more and more people at university, and I'm regularly coming back to university seminars to teach and to help people basically figure out what to do in their lives and like share a bit of experiences from the world of venture. Like the more and more students basically do not want to go to Siemens or BMW anymore, and they don't want to go to McKinsey, not to investment banking, but they say building a business or like at least joining an early stage startup is such a beautiful thing that this has become a viable career option. And particularly in that case, at that time, I need to do a shout out at the Unternehmertum team, because in the end, I think what they established over the last 15, 20 years of like providing entrepreneurial education, providing capital, providing networks, connecting also Mittelstand or like bigger enterprises with the startup world as customers. So all of that is amazing. And I think Munich, frankly speaking, maybe wouldn't be here, at least not at that point in terms of venture activities without Unternehmertum. So I think they did a tremendous job on like
big statement,
planting the seeds a bit of like the entrepreneurial ecosystem here in Munich. And I'm so happy to see that this is paying off. And if you look at, there's some statistics already out there that Munich has surpassed Berlin in terms of funding raised a year per startup and scale up. And we will see more of that, because Berlin was traditionally very B2C heavy, rocket internet driven, super strong school, I'm sure, brilliant founders coming out of that. But I think if you want to build a deep tech application for deep tech customers with like a deep tech team, that is not something that can be copied within 2 weeks or 4 weeks by AI in the future. You will most likely find those teams working from like a garage or like the Munich Urban Collab or so out of Munich.
Yeah, it's true that especially deep tech is quite relevant in Munich. I remember, I'm not super shocked, but yes, I was surprised that you're talking to people and you meet people and very smart people that are like, yes, we invest in deep tech and deep tech only. Like, okay.
It takes forever.
It takes forever. But
it's a long-term investment.
But okay, and it's so interesting. Like we had here Andres for Fresh Momentum. We had Maria from B Squared.
Yeah.
Herbert didn't want to come because he only wants to get the coffee and go. But, but like, no, it's true that there's so many examples of great VCs investing in deep tech that is like, yeah, definitely. I don't think that that's in Berlin. At that
I think
level.
also Berlin-based funds or in general European funds, I think everybody has realized that maybe the next big wave after like SaaS and fintech and maybe a bit of crypto, like and AI is going to be deep tech. Like you will need to, as a VC fund, to incorporate like hardware evaluation, like hardware scaling into your business model.
Yeah,
you will
hardware
need to
is
know,
true.
like software-enabled or hardware-enabled software applications. Something, for example, that we are very keen on, like all kind of like robotics, all kind of like in general deep tech applications where you have a hardware component but also a super strong software component, and the beauty lies in the combination of both. I think that's something where you can make good money, build big businesses basically in the future, because the plain vanilla SaaS use cases on like HR tech, sales tech, you name it, all of those niches have always been covered. So you need to find new applications, and we invest for the next 10 to 15 years. For example, look into climate tech. This is not, our climate won't be saved basically with software applications. We will need to get comfortable around hardware, and this takes 15 years. And that's maybe not that big wave of investment, early stage that we kick off right now, like companies that will define the world in 15.
Yeah, it's so interesting how VC just reflects what the world is worried about, because at the end, the LPs are worried about, and the partners are worried, and the people in the fund is worried about, and therefore they invest money in that.
But that's a bit of a trade-off, because the thing that we invest in right now, I mean, like we're early stage investors, we have a long-term investment horizon, so we need to invest in things that are relevant in 15 years from now, and other things right now. So 3 years ago, everybody poured money into delivery services for groceries. Like, yes, that's maybe something during the pandemic that people wanted to have right now, but like in 15 years down the line, I'm not too sure. Maybe some of them will still stick around, but not the broad majority. And I think that's kind of like the fallacy that you can have when you invest in venture, that you realize, okay, what's important right now? Yes, maybe solving a problem is good, but like what's essentially becoming the problem of the world in 15 years going down the line?
So interesting, like this analysis to be able to work in something that allows you to do this analysis.
I have no clue. What's happening in the next 15 years? I have some assumptions maybe, or like some projections, and maybe I need to have become a venture investor. But eventually, yes, the next 15 years are those that really matter.
And I've been lately listening to some interviews about the part of biotech, so about the life extension, even the immortality and things like that, related to the telomeres of your body.
It's crazy.
Man, when you think of 15 years ahead, it's like, man, 15 years ago, you think that we were in the same world, but we weren't. No. And it's like, when you try to forecast those 15 years, it's so wild. But that's why it's nice that it boils down to energy level, grid, talent magnet, because it's like, if you're able to pivot and you're able to do it now, you will be able to do it maybe in the future. Yeah. But then you said you don't know, you have no clue about what's going to happen. But have you seen any trend? And you can tell me what you want. We can talk about tech, or we can talk about pure economy, whatever you feel more comfortable with. What are the trends that you envision maybe for the near future?
I mean, like within 10X, we're not a thesis-driven fund. I think that's what I need to give as a disclaimer. So, like, it's not our strategy to dig very deep into trends and like pick that one company that we believe is the one solving that one problem for the next 15 years. But we're very receptive to like good founder profiles, no matter what kind of industry they spend time in. So I can just share like a few of the trends that I've seen in terms of like investment activity, in terms of the things that excite me. And the first one that I wanted to mention is, for a long term now, we had SaaS as like software as a service. And I think we're entering now a period where we have like service as a software. So where there's like business models, with particularly driven through latest advances in AI, that basically help to digitize previously like service business models and packages as a software. So one example is property management. Right? All of that, previously there were people sitting in like an apartment and they did like the invoicing, they were receptive to like craftsman requests, they did the accounting, they did the tenant onboarding. All of that was driven by people. But now suddenly you get in a position that like technology can take over some of those pieces, and you eventually offer property management as a software more or less, or with a software business model. It's in a subscription, basically, even though it was previously a service. Mm-hmm. The same is true for accounting. So I see a big wave of like accounting firms also a bit struggling because LLMs and like in general artificial intelligence can just take over large parts of their job, because in the end it's not rule-based anymore, but the LLM really understands what is the accounting term or regulations that I need to comply to, and then helps people to prepare their tax declaration or do their accounting on a daily basis. And it's again one example of those like service as a software where you get the job done. Mm-hmm. And essentially that's also enabling a new kind of business model, because it's not subscription or license anymore, but you pay per job done. So per onboarded tenant in property management, per invoice generated or automated, or per tax declaration essentially made. And that's very different to the traditional, okay, let's just pay $100 a month and let's hope for the best. But you have a better alignment of incentives between the suppliers and the buyers, because essentially they will only pay if the job has been done. And like one of the pieces that I try to spend time with these days.
That's super interesting. And I think it's totally right. Or at least it looks like the world will go there. The other day, even I was talking with a notary, and I was like, "Yeah, you're scared with this, blah, blah, blah." Especially in Germany. You have to stay there for. People doesn't know this outside of Germany. I didn't know. You have to stay there. They read everything in German. You have to stay there standing still.
6 hours, 10 hours. If you're doing an investment as an angel, like 5K in a company, you need to run to the notary to get your investment notarized. Particularly for people from the US or elsewhere in the world. They can't relate. I can't either. But this welcome to German bureaucracy sometimes.
The point is that it's a service, and I was like, are you scared of LLM, etc., like taking over your job? And he was like, actually not, because I think that at the end you want someone to blame, and
it's better a human than a technology.
Yes, and I think I can point out at you, and you will be here seated in whatever street, and I can come and say, hey, this is your thing. So he was like super convinced and super relaxed that the notary business wouldn't be disrupted. We'll see.
I think we will always need human, frankly, like, because in the end, humans want to interact with humans. So if you go to a notary, you don't want to have a machine in front of you that's reading out the documents. You maybe want to...
If you can do it times 5.
Maybe even do it like in a digital way, yes. But in the end, I think, and that's, again, also one of those themes that I'm very aware of, that most likely technology won't solve 100% of all cases. But what you will need to find, and I can give an example of one of our portfolio companies in that regard, you will need to find a system to keep the human in the loop. So you have technology that's covering like 95% of all cases in an automated fashion. But whenever the technology is unsure, so confidence intervals is not going to be reached, or like the technology realizes I may be the wrong one to judge, or I have missing information, then to intelligently loop in a human that's then covering not 100% of the cases, but only the remaining 5. And I think that's where the biggest value add lies. And we did one investment in a company called Fernride here in Munich. They're doing teleoperations. So the remote controlling vehicles over the cellular network. And their pitch from the beginning was, think about an autonomous driving algorithm. Are you sure that this algorithm will be able to guide you through 100% of all situations happening on the streets? And most likely the answer is no, because then there's snow that is hiding the sensors. Then maybe you're like stuck somewhere because your gasoline is empty, gasoline tank is empty, you're stuck in the middle of like a railway. That's, I think, the worst case scenario. Then there's maybe wind, there's rain, there's like reflecting situations and so on and so forth. So what if there's a backup system that whenever the technology, the algorithms do not know what to do, you can put a human, not into the car, but onto the car with like a remote control that can help you to guide that vehicle out of that situation.
Now I would like to understand a little bit more how is Tesla calling this autonomous driving system that they're so proud of, that I actually think is really good. I forgot, but they developed this. I don't know how they would have solved it, but I like the idea that, okay, if the case is too extreme, you know what? Let me take over.
It's just a backup system. And even if the backup system is not called, it's still good to have it there because it provides security and safety.
It's an insurance.
And that's what Fernride is doing, first on yards now, later on public streets. But in the end, it's about like providing that base layer of like human intervention, or at least leaving the opportunity for human intervention next to making profit or benefiting from technological advancements.
The good thing is that it does something that the notary said, that is you have someone to blame.
There's again a human in the loop.
Yes.
Yeah, we could spend an hour on like notaries in Germany, but let's maybe spare that for today.
As a last point, unless there's some specific topic that you want to
No, please let me know.
dig in, is like I would like to know some examples of success, if you want to put failures as well, but mainly success that you've seen, if you have been able to participate in those, like, and you can share them.
I mean, in terms of like
Investment,
companies that I have
companies
seen?
that you've seen.
Yeah, I mean, like the fund is still 4 years old.
Yeah.
Or only 4 years old. So as is the portfolio. If we invest pre-seed, seed, Series A, like I think most of the companies that I would mention, if I was at a larger outfit that's around for like 15 years, we don't have that breakout successes yet, but there's a couple of companies I can mention.
Yeah.
First one is we're one of the investors in Magic.dev. They're building an LLM basically for code generation, doing very nicely. Brilliant founders, raised good capital. I think they're now the first unicorn that we have in our portfolio.
Nice.
After 3-4 years. So I think that's something that makes us also a bit proud that we have found that company, picked it, and eventually invested in.
And so the unicorn is not something that for you stand out. You said no one stand out. We just have this unicorn there.
It's as with most of those AI applications. I mean, like it's a brilliant technology, it's a brilliant founder, but we will need to see how it materializes and monetizes in the long term. So and in the end, as an investor, you're not proven until you have returned some capital. So I try to remain humble also on those companies that are outside in at least already the first level of success. And there's a couple of other companies that I wanted to mention. The second one is Zoe out of Warsaw. They built an AI chatbot solution, first for e-commerce, later now for other businesses. And we spotted them, I think 2-3 years ago. Brilliant founders, collaborated with local founders, with local funds, on the investment, brought a US fund on board. Then they helped to secure the next financing round. They're staying very close with the founders and are now approaching a very good revenue level. We'll raise the next round next year, most likely, and have mastered the transition to the US, have built a big team. And I was always a bit of like a part of that, sitting on the board, meeting the founders regularly, helping them out with intros, but not standing in their way. And another example.
I want to put in, how difficult is this with the chatbots? Because I've seen so many chatbots since 2019, like not even the last 2 years. Of course, technology changed, but why do you think that they managed to get some space in such a competitive market?
Like it was, first of all, brilliant founders. They have really built an outstanding technical product.
Energy grid talent.
That's for sure. Like when we invested, I mean, like particularly that grid piece was impressive. I think almost every hackathon that the two founders participated on, they always won because they built chatbots. And then they said, okay, let's build a chatbot business.
Wow.
Started with e-commerce. And back then they were the first ones basically to bring chatbots to a level that you can almost immediately deploy them without training on a whole database and so on and so forth. And then, yes, ChatGPT came around, but since then the company has reinvented their product. They launched their own AI features. They went from like pure chatbot applications to go into inbox. That's like email deflection. They want to go full modality, also in terms of like voice calls. And so on and so forth. So I think that shows again that character of the founders, that even though apparently there's a big competitor entering the space, in the end they're able to navigate their way and just expand their product offering. Cool. And that's also something that's outside in. I know I'm not in the driver's seat, but like whenever I see them driving as a team, I'm really confident that they can build a big business out of that.
That's nice. And you were going to mention one more.
Yeah, there's one more. It's not as successful yet. Obviously, fingers crossed, but it's a company called Kertos out of Germany. Here in Munich. They have now, part of the team is in Munich, the other one is in Berlin. But I essentially met two of the founders when they were still building their old agency, like a product development agency. It was over summer. We just sat down, we met, we stayed in touch. Suddenly they got a third co-partner on board, and then I said, okay, we build a compliance operating system. So like what Personio is doing for HR, they do for compliance, compliant to like GDPR, ISO certifications, and you name it. So, and so
not
on
the
and so forth.
sexiest business, but that's why it could be interesting.
Maybe it can be attractive, yes. But we invested pre-seed based on the team and the deck when they had an idea. And they managed now to ramp up a team. They built a product. They had customers on the platform now. They're approaching 7-digit AR numbers over the course of next year. And like we have been part of that from basically the get-go, from the first line of code, more or less. and have seen that journey basically of also the founders developing into stronger personalities, stronger founders, building a business, employing people, like to realize that there's a huge impact of like what entrepreneurship is doing to the world. I think that's a very humbling feeling, and also making proud from time to time where I realize, okay, it's such a privilege to be in that job and to see people developing, businesses developing, and eventually hopefully leaving a positive dent in the industry.
It's so rewarding.
It is. And I feel, as I said, hugely privileged that this is actually a job what the two of us are basically supposed to do.
Yeah. Nice, Nico. I think there was a lovely ending to the interview.
It was not trained.
It was not trained, but it seemed like it was. So yeah, like if there's anything else you want to mention about the situation of the market, anything is open, of course. But otherwise, I like the fact that you mentioned these 3 successful examples. Because I think that some early founders need also to get more tangible examples sometimes. So it's not only about.
It's sometimes hard to speak about them, very frankly speaking, because you don't have a favorite children.
Of course.
Either, but like to pick 3 companies to speak about out of the larger portfolio, I always try to make it as tangible as possible. Why I like those companies and what I have in terms of like an emotional attachment to all the other portfolio companies I work with or that we work with as a fund. Obviously, there's always a good reason that we pick them. And our portfolio is publicly visible. So whenever people need inspiration on like what kind of businesses you invest in, what kind of businesses VCs invest in general, then always feel free to check it out. You said there's always my email address on my LinkedIn profile.
Yes,
now
it's not hidden.
It's a recording anyway. I try to be very approachable by founders. I cannot always promise to get back, but I will at least read, listen, and then whenever it's relevant for us, get back. And I already did investments where people reached out in a cold fashion to me. It's not only network driven. So yes,
via LinkedIn or email?
Both ways. But try to do your homework. I mostly cover B2B SaaS and fintech within the fund, even though I would also look into other things. But whenever you want to do a favor, you're in pre-seed seed, maybe somewhere around Europe, and building like in a software application or in fintech. And I think then you're at least like falling into my general thesis, and I would at least take a look at if there's a deck in my inbox. And then always happy to connect with entrepreneurs, with other VCs. We're very collaborative. I'm a very collaborative guy, and so always my pleasure to spend time with brilliant people, much smarter than I am, but still, always very good conversations.
This was my pleasure to spend this time with you, Nico.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot for the interview.
No, thank you so much.
See you soon.
See you soon.
Ciao.